I'm going to do this a little bit different than the others did. So I'll go to the top view, and I'm going to start a new sketch on the XZ plane, and I'll draw a rectangle from the origin, and then I'll dimension that rectangle height of 51, and I'll dimension it this width is the same, so I could either put an equal on here, this is equal to that, but I'll assume that you might want to change that in the future, so I'll dimension that as 51 as well. Then I'm going to use some steps that are similar to the way that you sketched it, so that hopefully that will make it easy to decide how to model this in the future. So I'm going to do another line, and I'm going to be careful not to click on the midpoint right here. If I'm going to draw a line, I'm going to come up from here, and I'll come over about like that. And then so to the edge of that slot, you have a dimension here of 16. So I'll go ahead and put in that dimension of 16 in here. So I'm trying to follow along a lot like you have actually sketched it. And then you have a dimension from here up to here as 32.7. I'm trying to put the dimensions in the same location that you have them in your sketch as well. And then you have a dimension from here over to here as 26.5. Alright, now I'm going to change these two lines to construction lines. So I'll just crossing window select those two lines. I'll right click and change those two lines to construction lines. We'll see why here in a few minutes. Alright, then I'm going to draw another line over here, and again I'm going to be careful that I don't click on the midpoint right here, because I'm not sure that it is to the midpoint. Actually, let's just go all the way over here, and I'm going to go over, and I'm going to come over to here, and I'll go up to this location. Now notice that these lines are black depending on your background, and that tells me that those are fully defined. And so now I'm going to add a dimension from this line over to this line, and I'll dimension that as 5. And I'm going to dimension the distance from here over to here. Now these dimensions aren't all needed, but I'm just trying to follow what you did. And I see that it's putting in an angle dimension instead of the linear dimension that I wanted. So I'm going to hit escape and undo that. And so if I drag these points, we see that this line isn't staying vertical. And so I'll do a vertical or horizontal constraint, and I'll select on that line, and now that line is going to stay vertical. I could select this one, but it's already perpendicular, so that one's okay. Alright, and then let's try to put that dimension in again. And so I'll dimension from here over to here, and you have that dimension as 21.5. And when it puts it in parentheses, that tells me that that dimension isn't really needed, that is a reference dimension. The other dimensions that are already in here already define that distance, so that isn't really needed. And then I'm going to, so this is 5 from here to here. I'm going to dimension this as 5 also. Okay, now this line, I'm going to change that to a construction line. Okay. And so I have left this line and this line are object lines, and then the outside lines are object lines. Now when I'm doing something like this, I would normally do the center line path, but you haven't defined what the center line path is, or you haven't defined what the radius here. That's the key, is you haven't defined the radius, so I'm not sure what it is. And so when I have a situation like that, I do the inside radius, or the smaller, the inside curve. I'll do that as my path rather than the center line. and we'll see why here in a minute. All right, so I'm going to do a fillet, and I'm going to put a fillet between here and here, and let's do that fillet. Let's say, well, I'll just do it as 5 millimeters for right now. Okay, so I have that fillet as 5 millimeters. I don't really need to fill it out here. On your sketch, it looks like you have the same radius here and out here, but for an equal distance, though, you would offset this, and it wouldn't be the same radius. It would, you know, from here over, it would be 5 millimeters bigger, or total radius 10. But your sketch, I think your sketch is a little bit off in that respect. All right, so I am done with this sketch, so I'm going to select Finish Sketch, and then I'm going to do a new sketch, and I'm using something called the Born technique, or Base Orphan Reference Node. So I try to do all of my sketches on these 3 work planes if possible. So I'm going to do a new sketch on the XY plane, and I want to put a circle. I want it to be somewhere in here, and so I'll just put it in here about like that. And then I want this point to be coincident with that point, and this point to be coincident with that point. So I'm going to do coincident here to here, and coincident here to here. Now notice that the circle didn't turn black. If I drag the center of this circle, I see that the center of this circle is not constrained. It could be anywhere. There's 2 ways I could do this. I could dimension this to the 5 millimeters, or I could tell it I want this center point to stay horizontal with the origin. And when I do, I don't need a dimension because it was already dimensioned in the first sketch from here to here. Now notice then I have my path on the inside curve of you know, as it's going along here. This would be the inside curve. Normally I would do the center line curve, but I'm going to show you why in this case I'm going to do this curve rather than the center line. Alright, so I'll finish that sketch, and I'm going to come down to the timeline, and I'm going to drag my timeline back so that the sketch number 2 is hidden for a minute, and then I'm going to do extrude. And I want to go down, and I want to go a distance of 6.45. So I want to go minus 6.45. Alright, so that gives me my stock material to start with. And then I'll turn on the visibility of sketch number 1 again so that I can see that path. And I'm going to drag the timeline over so I can see this circle. And then I'm going to do a sweep. Now several people suggested to do a pipe. Because of the way this sketch 1 is drawn, the pipe would go down the center line of the path, in which this sketch number 2 wouldn't be needed. But I'm trying to follow what you sketched, so I'm going to do a sweep. And so it asked me to select a profile. The circle is my profile, and then it asked me to select I need to put my selection tool over here on path, and I'm going to go down this path, and it automatically changed to cut. But if it hadn't changed to cut, I would need to put it on cut, and I'm going to say OK to that. Alright, now I'm going to show you the why I did it the way I did it, sweeping along that edge. So I'm going to go back to sketch number 2, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say show dimensions, so that I can see that the original dimensions that you had on your sketch. And I'm going to double click on this dimension, and I'm going to change that to 1 millimeter, so real tight radius. And so notice everything updates and it follows that bend. And let's do 0.5. And I'll press enter, and it updates so that I have even a tighter radius here. So if I had done the center line, if I get a arc in the center line that's too tight, this is going to end up being a straight line right here. You're going to lose a fillet. But and you might not realize why you're getting an error. So that's why I put the sweep towards the inside of this rather than the center line. And so let's say I want that to be 20 millimeters, that inside radius. So whatever I put in here, dimensions within reason, it's going to automatically update to give me the design intent that I am after.